Bueno, let me switch to Spanish at the beginning, just to say hello to all the people who are here. Saludo muy especial a todos los que nos acompañan en el día de hoy. It's a pleasure to receive you here at EIA University in this special moment in which we are going to discuss about how the world got rich with this extraordinary conference that we'll have from Dr. Deirdre McCloskey. And I have to say that this is because, and I have to express my gratitude to Libertad, Camilo Guzman. Thank you very much for having us this opportunity and for being like a partner in many other things. Remember that we can build on these ideas in the rest of the years and later on. So thank you very much to Libertad for this opportunity. I am also honored to receive here at EIA University Dr. Deirdre McCloskey, globally known as a leader on philosophy of libertarianism and also on liberal thought in the economy, an issue that without any doubt is becoming quite more relevant in this moment in Latin America in nowadays because of these political issues that we're facing in Latin America. It's an honor also because Professor McCloskey is a distinguished scholar at the Cato Institute in Washington, which is one of the most renowned institutes in the world. Professor of University of Illinois at Chicago, also in Europe, in many other prestigious universities, 12 honorary doctorates, president of many academic associations such as Economic History, Midwest Economics, and Social Science History. She is also a professor originally on English literature, later on economics and history of economics.
Economics first, then history, then English lit, and communications.
So many roles as a professor. Economist from Harvard University, a PhD from Harvard University, former professor of University of Chicago, University of Iowa, author and co-author of more than 25 books and more than 500 articles, scientific articles. So as you can see, as you have seen, she's a global thinker and a global leader. And for EIA University, well, as I said, it's an honor to receive you. Welcome to EIA University. This is an institution which is also a leading institution in academic excellence and which has worked especially on one of the topics which I know is one of the most relevant topics that you have worked on, which is innovation. We truly believe in innovation and also on entrepreneurship, especially tech innovation and tech entrepreneurship. So to receive you here in this moment of Colombia, in this moment of Latin America, well, this is a truly important moment. So with you, Dr. Deirdre McCloskey, welcome again, and the word is yours.
Now it's on. Now you can hear me. I'm an economist by origin, and I'm kind of an engineering economist in my heart. I ask always, how big? That's one of the main characteristics of engineers. They always want to know quantities, and I certainly do. Some of my colleagues in economics were not trained with and by engineers as I was, and they don't ask how big. And I think that's a scientific fault in economics, which I hope is. Could you please close the door? Make sure the door is closed. And in you'll have to excuse that I speak in English and that I stutter. I stutter especially over my favorite word, which is liberty. So you'll have to excuse that. I have a Spanish joke. You want to hear my Spanish joke? Even if you don't, you're going to hear it. Someone with 3 languages is called trilingual. Someone with 2 is called bilingual. Someone with 1 is called una gringa. So that's me. So the central question in economics is how we got rich and how to keep improving in a way that helps the poorest of the world. And in the last 2 centuries, we've fallen on, by accident, so to speak, the way to do this. And in brief, in a single word, the way is liberty. Allowing people, as the English say, to have a go, the sporting English. You get to serve at tennis, then the other person does, then you alternate serves. Having a go, letting people try things out. Innovation is not formulaic. There's no formula for innovation, or else it wouldn't be innovation. The novelties of our world in the last couple of centuries, which are all around us, electricity, structural concrete, inexpensive fabric, the modern university is an innovation. It was invented in 1810 by Humboldt in Germany. In the case of the University of Berlin, which for the first time combined teaching with research, conveying to the students old knowledge with the creation of new knowledge. For example, in chemistry, if we could stop the kind of sideshows, I'd appreciate it, because it distracts attention. If we could lock the doors, that'd be even better. So innovation has characterized the modern world in the last 2 centuries. In fact, the word capitalism, I'm going to argue, is terribly misleading from the scientific point of view and the political point of view. It's a very, I would have to say, stupid word, capitalism. It was not coined actually by Marx. He spoke of capitalists, the people, but it was his followers who added the ismus in German, the ism. I call the modern world not capitalist, not about capitalism, but about innovism, about innovation. Because that's what's peculiar about it. That's what's bizarre. Now, humans have always innovated, but very slowly. Up to around 1700, most innovations, at least in engineering and medicine, and were Chinese. Most of them were invented in China. For example, the blast furnace was long thought by Europeans to be a Swedish invention, where you have enormous amounts of iron ore and charcoal and limestone, and you make iron out of it, instead of making it in small amounts. No, the Swedes got it from the Chinese. But in the last 2 centuries, I don't need to emphasize because everyone knows it, the West has led in innovation. Although I expect now the rest of the world is becoming innovative in this sense. And becoming innovative through liberty. Spectacular example in the modern world is China, of course. China, up to the death of Mao and beyond, was unspeakably poor because Mao, in the style of earlier emperors of China, thought that the way to make things happen was top-down. And in 1978, his heirs decided, no, wait, maybe we should adopt innovism. Maybe we should let innovation happen from the bottom up. The result was that China went from unspeakable poverty to reasonable prosperity. China now has an average income about the same as that of Brazil, which is quite an improvement over the China of Mao and before. So, but of course, China's not the only example. When I first went to the land of my ancestors, Ireland, in 1967, it was unspeakably poor. Well, not as bad as China, but still very, very poor. And it was run under socialist principles. Since the independence of Ireland from the United Kingdom, the ideas of the 1920s and 30s of cartels, of central planning, of elaborate regulation, the sort of economic thinking that dominates in this country now, and indeed in my own country, ruled. And the result was very slow economic growth. From the 1970s on, Ireland started to use the bottom-up idea of letting people try things out. In the United States every year, it's true here, I'm sure, in a smaller degree because it's a smaller country, every year, this is an amazing fact, 30,000 new consumer packaged goods are introduced. Consumer packaged goods is a piece of jargon for marketing, and it simply means anything meant for consumers, not for manufacturers, but for the ultimate consumers, that's packaged. So banana in the grocery store is not a packaged good, but the cold breakfast cereal is a packaged good. So 30,000 new items. Had a friend in marketing, and she was studying over the last 5 years the new, now hear this, dog treats introduced into the United States. New dog treats, new brands of dog treats in the number of 1,700 over 5 years. This is loco, this is insane, but that's what an innovative economy does. It keeps thinking up new ways of doing things, new products of engineering, in medicine, biology, but also in institutions, in soccer, in what you call football. There are innovations all the time. The famous Messi turn, those of you who follow football know what I'm talking about, was an invention. New styles of managing, new tricks, new ideas. Economic growth comes from new ideas. Now wait, some of you have studied economics. and you know about our very important idea of the production function, average product and marginal product and total product. Some of you have done the diagrams. I used to teach them. I taught more of the Chicago boys at Chicago than Milton Friedman did. I taught the Chilean Chicago boys and the Brazilian Chicago boys because I taught the basic graduate microeconomics course for 10 years. So I taught this idea of the production function. All right, what about it? The production function tells you what the routine is, what is already known of how to make, I don't know, iron, or how to make an automobile, or how to grow coffee, right? Could you please close the door before you sit down? Thanks a lot. Close the door. But wait a second. Now I'm in favor of making iron and growing coffee, especially here in Colombia. I just had one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had. But that's just maintenance. If you own a house or a car, you've got to maintain it. If you don't maintain the roof, if every 20 years you don't replace the roof, your house is wrecked pretty quickly. Same with an automobile. If when the red lights go on, you say, to hell with that. The car breaks down. And that's maintenance. And we have to do investment to maintain things. Now, understand this from the big point of view. We have to invest to keep the same income we have now. We have to educate engineers, economists, managers to do the routines that we already know, that are in the economist's idea of the production function. But that's not modern economic growth. That's the routine. That's what we already know. What's happened in the last 2 centuries, I mean, it's obvious. Everyone knows this. I want to make it vivid to you. We've learned to do new things to an astonishing degree. As I said, we innovated before, but slowly. We introduced windmills. Those were invented in the Middle East and then spread to Europe. We invented writing, for that matter, we humans. We invented making iron on a small scale and then on a big scale. But it was slow. It was slow. It was slow. Since 1776, I'll choose that as kind of a symbolic date, not because of the American Revolution, but because of the publication of Adam Smith's An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. I always cross myself when I mention Adam Smith. He's my God. Since then, here's what's happened. Income per head in the world now, everywhere, on average, has gone from $2 a day per person. Now imagine trying to live in this town on $2 a day. The climate's good, you could sleep outside a lot, but you have one set of clothing, you don't eat well, you're not educated. It's miserable. The whole world was like that, except for some kings and priests. I think everyone here is a descendant of unspeakably poor peasants in Europe or Africa. I look around, maybe Asia. I don't see any Habsburg chins. I don't see any descendants of the crowned heads of these parts of the world. Like me, Irish peasants, those were my ancestors. $2 a day. Now, the average in the world, including all poor people, is $50 a day. That same amount that China and Brazil on average have. Going from $2 a day to $50 a day is to go from utter misery, children dying young, to adequacy, to the kind of life that even the average person can have in Brazil. In the United States now, and in Singapore and Hong Kong before it was attacked by the Communist Party, income per head per day is about $130 a day. In Switzerland, it's about $180 a day. So there's lots to do in bringing Colombia up to a, I don't know, French or American income per head. But it's an enormous improvement over our ancestors. Look, we're all Africans here. We all come from Africa eventually. Africa's where Homo sapiens developed. And then most of us, the ancestors of most of us here, slowly went out of Africa and turned left. If we turned right, we ended up in South Asia. If we went straight, we ended up in East Asia. But that was 300,000 years ago that Homo sapiens first developed. And for the first 99% of this 300,000 years, we got along on $2 a day as hunter-gatherers. Agriculture was an improvement briefly, but then it allowed more children to survive, populations grew, and on Malthusian grounds, income per head fell back to $2 a day. Bare subsistence. So what happened in 1776, besides the publication of The Wealth of Nations and the American Revolution? What happened? Well, what happened was an explosion of innovation of the sort I've mentioned. ¿Por qué? Why, for the first time in human history, did innovation become so fast that it ran faster than population growth? In 1800, the planet had 1 billion people. Now it has 8 billion people and 3,000% higher income per head in real terms. This is completely unprecedented. Why? My answer is the coming of the liberal idea. The idea, as I call it, of equality of permission, not equality of outcome. That's the new standard of equality. We were talking about the Harvard political philosopher Michael Sandel, who speaks of equality in these, not in my terms, but in these incorrect equality of outcome terms. We should cross the finish line of life, the race of life, all at the same time. The brain surgeon and the street sweeper should have the same income, according to our friends, the socialists. I, by the way, was once a socialist and believed this when I was a teenager. That kind of equality is very good. And in families and small groups of friends, in the office, on the job, in small groups, it works very well. If we have a small group of friends, let's think of teenagers. If someone brings a pizza to the party, he doesn't say, well, I bought the pizza, I'm going to eat all of it. He shares it with his friends. And in a family, think of it. A family is a socialist enterprise. To each according to his need, from each according to her ability. You don't send your 6-year-old son out to work to pay for lunch. Mama makes the lunch and gives it to the child. That's end state equality. Now, the problem is that end state equality doesn't work with large groups. It simply doesn't. In a group the size of the population of Colombia, we know perfectly well that if we gave everyone the same income, universal, not just basic income, but total income, everyone has the same income, we'd have too many street sweepers and not enough brain surgeons. It's hard to become a brain surgeon. It's easy to become a street sweeper. And if you get the same income, why bother? And that's free riding, we call it in economics. And it's the problem with taking the model of the family, the socialist model of the family, and applying it to the whole country. That's the problem. It doesn't work. Now, wait a second, someone will say. How about equality of opportunity? Don't tell me, Deirdre, about equality of permission, but we want equality of opportunity. Everyone starts the race of life at the same starting line. Well, if that would happen, I'd be delighted. We liberals are egalitarians. We want people to be equal. We certainly want them to be treated equally. We want men and women, subjects and governors, bosses and workers to be treated as equals, spiritually, politically, socially. That's my ideal, and I'm sure it's the ideal of most people here. Conservatives don't like this. They admire hierarchy. They like it that there are kings and so on. But the central idea of liberalism beginning among some intellectuals in Holland and England, a few in France and Scotland in the 1700s, was to break down the traditional hierarchies of agricultural societies. No more lords and peasants. We're all equal. So let's have, I said for years myself and thought very reasonable, let's have equality of opportunity. That's it, equality of opportunity. But the problem is that it's impossible. It's impossible. If you're born in South Sudan, you're not starting at the same starting line as someone born in France. The only way of achieving equality, of compensating for this unhappy fate that you're born in South Sudan, is to give you is to put you on an airplane and send you to Paris immediately. If you have bad parents, as Donald Trump did, Donald Trump's family was rich, but his parents were bad parents. There's no question about it. Apparently deeply unloving, because Donald has been worried about people loving him all his life. He starts in the race of life way behind, say, Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama was raised by parents on the south side of Chicago, but they were good parents. They weren't rich, but they were good parents. And she's way ahead at the starting line of Donald Trump. You say, well, wait a second, Donald Trump's very rich. He has gold toilets. Come on. You know, friends, Kafka's great short story, where the man wakes up and he's a giant insect. I mean, that's pretty horrible, to wake up as a giant cockroach. That'd be pretty awful. But imagine if you woke up tomorrow and were Donald Trump. Oi. Or Erdogan. Or Orban. Or Xi Jinping. I mean, this is a living hell that these people are in. And how to compensate for it. Some people are more intelligent than others. I mean, it's just a fact. I know it's irritating, but there are some people who are more intelligent than I am. Think of that. Some women are more beautiful than I am. I know, not many. But still, at 81, not so bad. I inherited from my mother. We can't compensate enough to bring people to the same starting line. But wait, what about what I claim was the heart of this new liberalism, this entirely new idea, as Thomas Jefferson articulated it? All men and women, dear, are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, it happened, of course, that Tom owned slaves. When he died in 1826, he didn't free them, as George Washington did. Some of his slaves, now hear this, some of Thomas Jefferson's slaves were his own children by a slave named Hemings, Sally Hemings. Oy. So Tom had a certain problem with this idea. But still, that was the idea among advanced intellectuals. And I claim that it's equality of permission that they were talking about. Equality of permission against the earlier hierarchy, where if you were a queen, you were a queen. If you were a milkmaid, you were a milkmaid, period. Get used to it, dear. If you behave yourself well, you'll get eternal salvation in heaven. If you're blind and crippled and put by the west gate to beg, stop complaining. You have an infinite life ahead of you if you're good at being a beggar. That was the attitude that Thomas Jefferson, among others, Voltaire and others, opposed. And that's the beginning of liberalism. And I'm claiming that what it was not equality of outcome, the socialist ideal, or equality of opportunity, the social democratic ideal, but it was equality of permission. Now, what's equality of permission? It means allowing people to do things. In science, in the arts, in language. There's no central planning of the Spanish language. Yeah, there's a group in Madrid that keeps trying to prevent English phrases from getting into Spanish. There's one in Paris too, and this is crazy. It doesn't work. You can't stop the French from saying le weekend, le parking. The French Academy hates it, but too bad. Language evolves by a spontaneous order, like biological evolution. People try out things if they're allowed to. They try out 30,000 new consumer packaged goods every year. They try out women's equality. They try out opening a new company. They try out moving to another part of crossing borders. I'm against borders. I'm against nations. I think they're a very poor idea. As you may have seen in the newspaper this morning, I'm against central banks. I'm against hierarchy. The bosses are okay. If we agree to go work in a company, we agree to be bossed. We agree to be supervised. We're not a slave. This phrase you often hear, wage slavery, is a silly contradiction in terms. There's no such thing as a wage slave. If we're free to leave the company and go to another company, we're not a slave. Slaves couldn't move. Slaves and children, now hear this, are what all other political philosophies, except for liberalism, assume. In socialism, fascism, communism, social democracy, name your political philosophy, monarchy, everyone's to be treated as a child, as a subordinate child, for their good or for their bad, but anyway as a child. Liberalism is the only political philosophy that insists on treating people as adults. I often call it adultism. Adultism. You're to be treated as a free adult, able to move, able to try things out. And that was the core of the new idea. And then, alas, towards the middle of the 19th, three new political philosophies were invented in the 19th century. In order, in chronological order, nationalism, socialism, and what you might call syndicalism. Trade unionism is a version of it. Cartels among companies is another version of it. The idea in Italian fascism that we would organize all the companies in a single industry into a single cartel, and that would be a good thing. That's the idea. So those three ideas were just terrible. All three of them were disasters. And if you don't think so, know that Hitler's party was called the National Socialist Workers' Party. If you like those three ideas, maybe you should join Hitler's party. So that there was this turn away from the basic idea of equality of permission to an idea that I'm from the government and I'm going to help you. That's the old joke in English. The three most unbelievable sentences in English. First one is, the check is in the mail. It'll come, don't worry. Yeah, I'm going to pay you back. The second one is, of course I'll respect you in the morning. And the third one is, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you. Well, so I'm claiming that innovation, trying out things, the evolutionary mechanism that's made us so rich in the last 2 centuries, and can continue to, is caused by equality of permission. Now, even with the coming of nationalism, socialism, and syndicalism, a substantial part of the economy and art and science and music is left alone by the government, enough that this encouragement to innovation takes place. But the trouble is that what we're doing in the modern world is reinventing feudalism, reinventing hierarchy, reinventing the idea that there are inherited kings and lords who deserve to be honored and obeyed. And that's a danger. Now, a couple more points before I end, and we can talk about it. For one thing, my theory is not the usual economic theory. The usual economic theory depends on this idea of the production function. Inputs, outputs. And the trouble is, as I said, that that's just a formula for routine. What matters, what actually changes people's lives, transforms their lives, is innovation. And that's not accounted for in this economic way of looking. So my economist colleagues keep trying to bring it back to investment. They say capital accumulation is what made the modern world. And that's wrong. That's a big mistake. Yeah, you have to have a hall, chairs, other pieces of capital equipment, educated people like you, in order to have a talk like this, right? You got to have this physical and human capital. But that's only what's necessary. It's not sufficient for innovation. We also need a labor force. We also need rainfall. We also need the existence of the Spanish language. We also need the existence of the universe. For every event, there are an infinite number of necessary causes. But what we're looking for in science is a necessary and sufficient cause for the remarkable result of modern economic growth. And that, I claim, to go back, is, see, I always stutter on the word, liberty. Now, our friends on the left, as I said, I was once a Marxist myself. I was kind of a mild Trotskyist, if you can feature that. I'm not very scholarly, so I didn't really know much about Marxism, but I thought I was a Marxist for a while. And partly that's because a child comes out of a socialist institution called the family. So it's very natural when you're a teenager to say, well, let's solve the problem of poverty by bringing other people into our loving family. That'll take care of it. So, all right, our friends on the left claim that it's exploitation that explains the modern world, that it's takings, that it's imperialism, that it's surplus value extracted from the proletariat, that it's the gold that the bosses have in the back office that they're hiding from us. That's what makes us poor. And oddly, in the theory of the left, made us rich. The surplus value was accumulated, and for some reason, only in the modern world, which makes no sense at all. And that made all of us rich. So stealing from us made us rich. Huh? It's, on its face, a very strange theory, this theory of the left. But it persists to this day. People still believe that you can solve the problem of poverty with redistribution. Redistribution is sometimes, as I said, or maybe I didn't, I'm a Christian, and I believe that I should help poor people. I give 10% of my income to my church, and then they are more expert at distributing that to poor people. So I'm in favor of that. But the real way to help the poor is to have 2,000 to 3,000 to 10,000% increases in income per head. That's what's made us, the descendants of peasants, so rich. Imperialism, slavery, did not cause the riches of the modern world. One way to see this, very simple, is to note that imperialism, slavery, is ancient, and yet didn't result in, say, the Roman Empire, in what I call the Great Enrichment. This sudden ice hockey stick of economic growth. So that's my story. Innovation makes the modern world. Innovation is unpredictable in its essence. Innovation, I'm sorry to say this, in a business school, can't be taught. But innovation is the heart of how we became rich. New ways of doing things. Innovation is caused by liberty. Innovation, this is against Mariana Mazzucato, who I understand is influential here in Colombia. She says she speaks of the entrepreneurial state, that the government can be the entrepreneur. Now this is insane. This is crazy. The idea that an arts graduate in an office in Bogota can decide for you what the next innovation should be in, I don't know, anything you want to name, transport or whatever, is just crazy. Yet a lot of people believe it. They believe in centralization. They believe in top-down management. They believe in planning. They believe in planning because, look, we've got to try to plan our lives, or at least our day. But have you noticed? Your plans often don't work out and turn out to have not been the right thing to do. So this top-down stuff doesn't work. What works is harnessing or using human creativity. And that comes only from letting people get on with it, letting people alone, helping them when they need it, but not corrupting them, not promising them income if they don't work, if they can, but helping people to get jobs. In this country, you have a high minimum wage, which is disastrous for poor people, as in my country. You have regulation. I was just in Argentina. Argentina is much worse even than the United States or Colombia in the matter of regulation. You have protection against foreign goods. You have central banks, a central bank. None of this you should have. So I say, be liberated. That's all I ask. Thank you very much. So I'll be glad to talk with you.
Let's have a possibility of questions or remarks.
I'm going to have to say that it has to be in English, although it can be translated, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for your insightful lecture. You mentioned China, and the way China became innovative was thanks to Deng Xiaoping's revolution. He sent people abroad to see what was happening in USA, in Europe, and he sent people to see what was going in different fairs, and they brought that knowledge back, and that's the way they became innovative, and that's the way they changed a lot. So my question is, if we want to be innovative, it's not necessary that Colombia is a very close country. We are we do not bring people from abroad, we do not travel. What would be your advice in that regard, to be more innovative?
Well, one thing I'd advise is that my own government stop making it so hard for people from this country to get visas to go to the United States. I mean, it's ridiculous. We charge hundreds of dollars and because we're afraid of foreigners. This is crazy. Yeah, it's a good business for some businesses. But I don't think knowledge parks are the way to go. Knowledge parks are a top-down idea. I think real knowledge parks evolve spontaneously, as San Jose in California, or 128 in my home state of Massachusetts. You know, I think the way forward is to draw back on the statist idea of top-down planning in every way you can. Cut tariffs, make them zero, ideally. So you know, in a way, my argument's very simple because it worked in northwestern Europe in the 19th century, and then it spread to the world. It worked in China, Taiwan, Ireland, South Korea. It works if we don't do it, if we go the other way, that our friends on the left want, or our friends on the right too. The ordinary spectrum is filled with statists, and make the state bigger and bigger, we're doomed. We'll have production functions, but we won't have innovation.
Thanks for your thanks for the lecture. I do think innovation in today's world cannot be differentiated from intellectual property and the role that it plays. So I have a twofold question. First, what do you think about information or innovation as a public good? And second, what do you think intellectual property does it play a role in the generation of more innovation or propositions from, I don't know, Stefan Kinsella, I think it is, to abolish intellectual property will be more beneficial for innovation?
My old friend Douglas North, alas, told us that improvements in property happened in the modern world, and that's why we became rich. This is mistaken history. It's simply wrong. Of course, private property is a necessary condition for a functioning economy. If you don't have private property, you have the prisoner's dilemma in spades, redoubled, and vulnerable. People are taking advantage of each other all the time. They you know, imagine if all the cows, the dairy cows, were not owned by anyone. People would go shoot them to eat them, obviously, and we wouldn't have any milk. So private property is necessary. But as I said, necessary is not decisively causal. The great economist Schumpeter believed, as many people do, that banking was what caused the modern world. He didn't know that there was banking in Mesopotamia 2,000 years before Christ. He didn't know that there was banking in 4th century Athens on a big scale. Banking is maybe necessary. Central banks are not. But banking is. Somehow you've got to marshal the investment to put it into projects. But it's not causal. Now, information is a public good. Yeah, damn right. Information is a public good. And this is why I'm opposed to patents and copyrights. Patents, if they were just short, I wouldn't have any problem with. I mean, you look, if they were 8 years or 10 years. Most innovations in manufacturing are either not patentable because they're just general ideas, or they're trade secrets. Trade secrets I have no objection to. You think of a new way of making glass bottles, your competitor doesn't know about it, you get the advantage, the first mover advantage. And that's enough to give you the incentive. The idea of intellectual property is a scheme for lawyers to make more money. That's all it is. It's an economic disaster. I speak with some warmth about this because the University of Chicago Press wants to reissue a book that I wrote in 1985 called The Applied Theory of Price, which, by the way, is available as a PDF on my website, free. And it's a very good microeconomics book, out of print for many, many years. So the University of Chicago Press wants to reissue it. We can't find who owns the copyright. You say, wait a second, that must be easy. No, it's not. Because publishing companies have been merging with each other like mad. And they're very uninterested in doing any work to find out where the copyright is. I don't own it. Some publishing company does. I don't know what it is. So patents and copyrights are, if they were short, they'd be okay, but they're not short. There's this tremendous pressure to make them longer. And so, to hell with that, that's wrong. But yes, of course, information is public. But that doesn't make it a public good in the sense that Paul Samuelson wanted to think about it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it should be subsidized by the state. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
My wonderful presentation.
Your extraordinary presentation.
It was a mistake. That's what he meant.
My name is Miguel Jaramillo. I work for the university, and I would like to ask you, you do not like the idea of controlling governments and controlling institutions.
Yeah.
So what would be your perspective for a country like Colombia, where we have such a big central government? What kind of role should the government have in a libertarian economy or libertarian country?
Look, I'm not an anarchist.
I'm not saying you are.
Unlike my friend David Friedman, who's Milton Friedman's son, I'm not an anarchist. I believe in government. I believe in a small, competent government, which does things. I mean, for example, in my own country, I can hardly sleep at night for fear of the Canadians invading the United States. You know how aggressive they are. And if they invade the state of Maine, as far as I'm concerned, they can have northern Maine. But when they get to Portland, I want the federal government to call out the army and stop the bastards. And indeed, we've been through it just now. In the case of plagues, I want the government to have the power to quarantine people. Now, I think in the COVID-19 epidemic, most governments grossly overdid this, which is a bad sign for the present world, because we went along with it. There weren't riots on the street against closing down virtually all businesses in New York. It proved to be kind of a stupid thing to do. So there are things the government can do, but there are a bunch of things that they do now that they don't need to do. Here's a surprising one, just to make you think: roads. People say, "Oh, Deirdre, you don't believe in government. Don't you want roads?" And I say, no, I don't want public roads. I want private roads. In most countries, not in Latin America or the United States or Japan, most university systems are entirely state. Here they're not. This institution is a private institution and should be. Again, higher education shouldn't be a function of the government. Indeed, lower education shouldn't be a function of the government. 99% of parents want their children to do well. Have you noticed? Your mother loves you, dear. Believe me, she does. I don't know her personally, but I'm absolutely certain she loves you. And she wants you to do well in life. So she would want you to go to school and learn to read. Now, I'm not against taxing me to help poor people go to elementary school. I'm willing to go along with that. But I'm not willing for it to be a state system. And so it goes on roads, by the way. Now, with electronic monitoring, we could make every road in Colombia private. You say, monopoly. No. Competitive roads. Why not? Indeed, we had them in Britain, the United States, Sweden, lots of other countries, in the 18th and 19th century. Turnpikes were so-called because you turned a pike being a long spear, to open to the traffic after they had paid their toll. And so it goes. Some things government should do, not too many. Because otherwise we're children and slaves. First we're children, we're being treated nicely by the state, and then it switches.
Good morning, I'm Diego. I would like to ask you, with making a comparison with Robert Gordon, the rise and fall of the American growth, and he firmly...
Who is this? What is this person again?
Bob Gordon.
Bob Gordon, yeah, he's an old friend of mine, and I have opinions about Bob.
He said innovation from the 1870 to 1970 was spectacular, and he's not expecting more innovation like that. What is your take about that?
Yeah. This is Bob Gordon's The Rise and Decline of American Prosperity, or some silly title. Books that tell us that the world is coming to an end are very popular. For some reason, people like to buy them. My books say, no, the world's not coming to an end. In 100 years, income per head will be 8 times what it is now. 8 times. Average is $50 a day. It'll be $400 a day by the year 2100. Bob Gordon says that he thinks that innovation is exhausted. Now, artificial intelligence alone makes his prediction look kind of silly. My friend Joel Mokyr, an economic historian like me, both of us disagree with Gordon. And Joel says, look at biological innovation. Gordon, maybe mechanical innovation is slowing down, but biological innovation is accelerating. The basic problem, there are two basic problems with Bob's argument. The first is, how can we know the future of innovation? If we knew the future, if he knew the future of innovation, he could sell it short and make money. So that's one thing. That's why we shouldn't have central banks, by the way, because the central bankers think they know the future of the economy. If they actually knew it, they wouldn't be central bankers, they'd be billionaires. So, okay, that's one problem. But the other problem is that most of the world hasn't even caught up to the innovations of the 19th century, although more and more it is. In 1960, the 5 billion of the 5 billion people in the world, 4 billion lived on $2 a day. Now, with 8 billion people in the world, 1 billion live on $2 a day. So contrary to what Bob's saying, outside the United States, things are improving. They are improving in the United States too, but he doesn't acknowledge that. So this pessimism sells, but it's silly. Young people are hopelessly pessimistic about the environment. They won't have children because of it. The world is coming to an end. Why have kids? This is crazy. The world is not coming to an end. I'm worried about global warming. I do believe it's caused by humans, by carbon. I want to do something about it. And all over the world, entrepreneurs, engineers, chemists are working on solving it. And over again in the last 2 centuries, these externalities from economic growth have been solved and solved and solved. How have they been solved? By individual innovation. I can't hear you. I still can't hear you. It's not on.
Okay, now, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
My question was regarding what you just said. The environment, how can you protect it with the liberal thinking, knowing that
Very easily.
there is short-term gains in this idea? So first of all, that one. And I think the second one is, how do you control the need in order to create something or become innovative?
The what? Control the what?
The need.
The need?
Yeah, exactly. You have to become needy. You have to need to grow, and you have to be hungry to become innovative.
I think I understand the second point. And the first point is that we've done this over and over and over again. Let's take the ozone hole in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, which was growing. Extremely dangerous. If the ozone layer goes away, we all die of skin cancer. I mean, everyone does. Well, we discovered that it was being caused by air conditioning fluid and, hear this, hairspray. Margaret Thatcher, a conservative, in some ways a libertarian, a big user of hairspray, organized the international community to do something about it. And we did. We outlawed those fluorocarbon, whatever they're called in chemistry. Said, no, you can't use that for air conditioning fluid. And for God's sakes, you can't use it in hairspray. Stop doing it. That's one point. The other point is that it's not true that ordinary business people want to hurt other people. This is an underlying assumption on the left and sometimes on the right. On the right, they say, yeah, we hurt people, damn right, I don't care. But on the left, they say, oh, you hurt people, that's terrible, you're evil. Most business people don't want to pollute. Now, they're famous, the Bhopal disaster in India is a spectacular example of, screw you, I'm going to pollute. And for that, tort law, if you put managers in jail for doing that, that would be a good start. And in any case, most business people are humans. Someone like Donald Trump is a sociopath, so he's an example of screw you. But most business people are not like this. And in fact, all over the world, as I said, this is not an exaggeration, I think you know it, people are working night and day to solve the global warming problem, to be able to tune the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. In Iceland, for example, which has an unlimited supply of thermal energy because it sits on volcanoes, they're developing what's now a very expensive technology of carbon capture from the atmosphere. And it's expensive because it requires a lot of energy, and it's not going to help to burn coal to get the energy to do that. Okay, but they can do it. And there are ways out of this. One example was horse poop. Before the invention of the automobile, big cities getting bigger and bigger and bigger had a really serious problem with horse manure. And you'd think, well, come on, that couldn't have been much of a problem. It was really big. It's not just that it was dirty and kind of disgusting, but it was dangerous. It was dangerous. It would dry up and become particulate and give people all kinds of diseases. And then we invented the automobile. End of problem. We were exterminating whales to get lighting for our housing. It got more and more expensive, and organic chemistry developed mainly in Germany. And we thought, no, wait a second, this stuff oozing out of the ground in Pennsylvania can be made into kerosene. So it's worked and it's worked and it's worked. Why would we think that it won't work this time?
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I've got a question here. You talked about income per capita, right?
I can't understand what you're saying.
Yes. Sorry.
Speak slower.
We've talked about income per capita, haven't we? And we've said that income has grown in the last decade for some countries and so. But
for most countries.
We've said also that maintaining ship, it's the main idea for the world itself. Then how can the people that are earning more still in poverty in their own countries?
Can someone explain what he just asked?
Ma'am, I'm asking
I'm sure it's a good question, but I don't understand it.
I'm asking if we grow the income per capita, but still poverty and things like that happen in the countries where the income is higher.
No, not much. The poverty of poor people is steadily declining in places like Britain and the United States. In 1960, there were lots and lots of very poor people in the United States. Now there are still poor people. But that doesn't mean that it's been a bad idea to have innovation and economic growth. It's not going to make poor people better off to make everyone else poor. That doesn't work. Redistributing income, the problem is that we say in English the government has sticky fingers. If it goes through the government, I mean, this is one of the problems with foreign aid. Foreign aid from one government to another ends up in Swiss bank accounts. It doesn't get to the poor in Ghana. So the way forward is more liberty for faster economic growth. That solves the poverty problem. And it's the only long-term solution to the poverty problem. Equalizing incomes, I've told you, is bad incentive effects, but anyway, it doesn't do much. If you took, I don't know, the top 10% of the income distribution in the United States and took away all of it and gave it to poor people, that might increase poor people's income, I don't know, what, 25%, 50%, 1 year? Because you can't go back and do it again once you've expropriated the rich. Okay, so that's 1 year you've helped. That's nice. I want to help the poor people. But in the long run, the only way to help the poor people is to make the economy innovate. Innovation, innovation, innovation. Liberty, liberty, liberty.
Dr. McCloskey, first of all, thank you for your wonderful lecture. My question is also oriented towards foreign aid. And I mean, it's claimed by certain economists that sending help in the form of goods to underdeveloped countries is harmful for their economy as they are more competitive than the nationally produced goods. Hence, underdeveloped countries, as those in Africa, should reject foreign aid. So my question is, when I go to the supermarket and the cashier asks, do you want to send money to Africa? What should be my response? Am I really helping the African economy or not?
I can't understand what you said. Can you ask it in some simpler way?
Yeah, sure thing. Does the foreign aid guided towards Africa?
Foreign aid?
Yeah, foreign aid.
Foreign aid is I mean, it comes out of a generous impulse sometimes. Mm-hmm. Often in my own country, it's a program of the Department of Agriculture to help American farmers. It's not really meant to help Indians, South Asians. But foreign aid is not how to develop Africa. Here's one thing that would help African development very, very much. The common agricultural policy, the agricultural policy of the EU, if it was dropped and no longer was, say, Hungary being subsidized, Erdogan being helped by taxes on Germans, and if instead Europe got its food and fiber from the Sahel, as it easily could, it's been calculated that increase in income of African farmers would be 10 times more than all the foreign aid. So the way to, and the same is true for the United States and Canada. If we look south and let, I don't know, poor Haiti, for example, grow crops for us, Haiti's better off, and God knows it needs to be better off. But we have to stop the Department of Agriculture from being the agent for a monopoly of American farmers. I mean, it's crazy what we subsidize in the United States in farming.
Thank you, Doctor.
I'd like to hear a female voice. I've had a lot of male voices. There's a female voice over here. It's always the guys who talk first.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McCloskey, for your lecture. I want to know your perspective of how language can help us become more innovative societies.
Language?
Language, yes.
Yeah.
I have like this analogy in my head when you speak about language that helped the bourgeoisie class to the rise in your book, The Bourgeois Dignity.
Yeah.
So I also like to know your perspective on the role of language in this, in innovation.
Language is central to human society. Bart Wilson and I, Bart is an experimental economist at Chapman University, are writing a survey article on what we call humanomics, which is economics with the humanities left in. Philosophy, history, literature, left in. And we think this will be a better economics. Not to abandon mathematics or whatever, but to add to it. And in our paper, we make the point that what's distinctive about humans is not rationality, which is what my economist colleagues often talk about. Grass is rational. Bacteria are rational. They seek their food and reproduction rationally. A lion is rational. Lions are not courageous. When they see an elephant, they run away. They're prudent, but so is everyone else. So are all forms of life. Trees are rational. What's distinctive about us is language. And there's overwhelming evidence for this. I could go into it, but Bart's the expert on this. So, as Adam Smith, the blessed Adam Smith said, he did humanomics. Adam Smith did. But then the economics that he invented gradually drifted away from this insight that language is central to the economy. From the 1980s on, I worked on the rhetoric of economics. That is, how language works within the economics profession. And my friends keep saying to me, now you know, actually it works in the economy. And I said, well, I don't want to talk about that. I just want to talk about how it works in science. And then I finally got it. And how we talk about each other changes how we behave towards each other. I mean, it's obvious. In the 1700s, in places like Holland and England and Scotland, people stopped saying merchants are bad, automatically bad, that it's a sin to get profits. They stopped saying that innovation is dangerous. You can follow this in the language. Until the 19th century, the very word innovation was a bad word in English. I imagine it's true in Spanish and French too. It was a bad word, innovation. We don't do that. That'll change the hierarchies. That'll hurt that'll unsettle the great chain of being where everyone's placed and stays. So when we start saying all people are created equal, and we gradually come to mean it, take it seriously. I mean, look, my country and yours too, until 19, get your centuries right, 1865 had slavery. So, the great land of liberty. Ha. And race is still a deep problem in the United States. Well, at least race in this stupid way of defining it by complexion. So, yes, language is crucial. If we keep talking about business people as greedy, we're never going to get over statism and socialism. You're greedy when you go to the grocery store, aren't you? I hope you are. On behalf of your family, you look for the best deals, don't you? Is that greedy? I think this is a stupid way of defining greed. Greed is a great and terrible sin. It corrupts your soul. Greed is prudence in the absence of the other virtues: justice, love, temperance, faith and hope, courage. If you're unbalanced and all you do is greed, then you're Donald Trump. And you're doomed. So yeah, language matters. And it's not just an add-on, it's essential to how the economy works. And actually, one add-on to this. Business people deal with each other with equality of permission. They have to. You can't, as a business person, take a kind of lordly superiority to, I don't know, your people you're dealing with, the customers or the bankers or the suppliers or your colleagues. If you do that, you're not going to be in business very long. A bourgeois society, a middle-class society, has this habit of equality of permission. Not equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity, but you can join the race wherever you start. You're free to try things out, to have a go.
Hi. Hello. I want to ask you if maybe you think that culture is also plays a big role in innovation, because I feel like I actually have some data that says that in some countries in Asia, they have like a bigger proportion of these careers that gives you like more of a basis for maybe innovate. As you said, innovation cannot be taught, but
I don't think so.
But I feel like you can have some basis if you have some.
No, that whole approach I don't think is correct. It's Max Weber's approach. Max Weber was a great, one of the inventors of modern sociology, an economist and historian too. And 100 years ago, in one of the great books of the 20th century, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, that's how he talked. He said that Protestants, Calvinists in particular, had an incentive to work hard and save a lot. And it doesn't matter what he said, but that's what he said. And ever since, we've tended to think of innovation as coming from groups that are particularly innovative. So, and I think that's usually a mistake. All populations, I think, have probably the same percentage of courageous innovators. Naturally, biologically, probably. Because it seems to me that it's very plausible, since we all came from the same root, that we all have roughly the same disposition. A certain percentage are willing to take a chance, and the rest of us are not. Okay? That comes from the caves. That comes from way back in this long history before the Great Enrichment. So I think people are picking up the psychological angle incorrectly. They should be doing it sociologically. What are the surrounding ethics, institutions, mothers, teachings that make for a conservative and non-innovative society versus an innovative one. I mean, look, let's take, well, you know, you can give lots of examples of this. And I'm not going to embark on it because it'll sound kind of nationalistic and racist. But there are parts of the world where innovation is suppressed and parts of the world where it's encouraged. Again, let me go with the same example I used, China. China, up until 1978, was a non-innovative society. By law. If you earned a lot of money, you were executed. Until well into its economic growth, it was a capital offense. You got executed for being a millionaire. It wasn't enforced, but that was the law. And then the Communist Party recognized that by letting a little bit of innovism in, not the rest of a liberal society, but a little bit of innovism in, it could become as rich as Hong Kong was. It hasn't quite succeeded in that, but still Hong Kong earns about twice as much as the mainland does. But Xi Jinping is in the business of reducing Hong Kong to the level of the rest of the society. And he's using state enterprises to buy up private firms. There's a scheme to do this with private higher education in Colombia. You'd better work against it.
Again, thank you very much for your conference. I just want to have some ideas from you about what's your opinion on cash transfers?
Cash transfers?
Yes, for poor people. I mean...
Yeah, look.
And let me explain. Cash transfers for those who are maybe in the lowest level of poverty and which maybe they don't have the possibilities to get access to be innovative. So how to deal with that? What's your opinion about that?
Well, in the first place, they have got access to being innovative. You and I were speaking before, and I mentioned the case of Southern Italians. Some of you will be descendants of people from Calabria and Sicilia. They came to the New World with the shirt on their back. They couldn't speak English or Spanish. They didn't know how to read in any language. They were unspeakably poor. You let them work. You didn't have a high minimum wage. You didn't have obstructions to entering this or that job. And in 3 generations in the United States, the Italian Americans, mainly from the South, were Supreme Court justices, CEOs, university professors, successful in all fields. So, liberty first. Now look, as I said, I'm a Christian. Milton Friedman and James Tobin, from the right, so-called the right, from liberalism and statism, which is a better way to put it, in the 1950s, proposed what Milton called a negative income tax, that you give cash subsidies to poor people. And you don't just cut them off as soon as they get a job. That was what is wrong with a lot of the methods for giving advantages to the poor we have, or advantages, some subsistence. But I really think that that's picking up the wrong end of the stick, as we say in English. What we've got to give poor people is liberty. Now look, the famous French remark in the late 19th century which said, the law in its wonderful equality, permits both the rich and the poor to sleep under the bridge. You know, okay, that's funny. I get it. But if you let the poor work in a liberal economy and even a not so liberal economy, they do well. It's not true that the poor are trapped in poverty. It's not true that the poor are a natural class of poor people. It's simply not the case. The statistics show it. So, you know, I'm worried in my own country about a decline in mobility from one income group to another. I think it's got rather obvious causes in statist economic policies. So, liberty first. Implement that, and your country will become as rich as Switzerland. And then you'll not only have good coffee, you'll have good cheese.
Dr. David McCloskey, thank you very much for coming here, for having this conference. Thank you a lot. We really enjoyed, I'm sure about all of us.
Thank you very much. It's been a good conversation.
Thank you very much. Miguel. I'm sorry. I'm doing very well, thank you.